holiness denomination. And as such, we moved around a lot. It was how you advanced in your career as a preacher in our denomination. And it didn't really impact me until 7th grade. We had lived in Ohio from 5th through 7th grade. And for the first time in my life, I had put down roots. I found friends I loved. I loved the place. I had hopes and dreams. And then my dad got called to a church in Oregon, and we moved the summer after 7th grade. And for the 2 years that we lived there, it rained every single day, and I cried myself to sleep every single night. And I hid it. You would never, ever have known. It was the one year, my 9th grade year, that I was popular. I don't know how. I yelled really loud as a cheerleader, and I was a cheerleader. A nerd was a cheerleader. I should have loved it, but it began a relationship with depression. We didn't call it clinical depression back then, and I had no resources. I had no inner resources to say, hey, I'm depressed. I just hid it, and I got really good at hiding it. I'm still very good at hiding it. If I know you, you probably would never know that I deal with panic, anxiety attacks, and depression. So we moved to Texas. Through high school, I had headaches every day. The depression got worse. I hit it more. I hit college. I got a full ride to college and then blew it the first year because of my fear of failure and really bad project management skills. And my depression got worse and turned into panic attacks. So I began getting used to panic attacks. I had read that if you take vitamin B12 under your tongue, then it'll prevent it, right? But in my denomination, in my upbringing, on the cultural side, it was, if you have a problem, you have to pray to God more. And the Holy Spirit has to fill you more. And you don't have enough discipline. And at home, even though I was very loved by my parents, we were surrounded by the Bible and Prevention magazine. So prevention tells you if you walk more and you drink more water, it'll solve everything, right? So I had no way to say, I have these problems, because I was responsible for fixing them. It was my deal. So fast forward, I met a guy and I got married and I got pregnant 3 times and I sucked at it because my body was out of my control. I could die when I gave birth. My panic and my depression increased. And I kept trying to fix it. I left the church. I thought that would fix it. It didn't. So in 2007, I decided to do the most radical thing I could think of and to do all these things that my religion said would send me to hell. So I sowed my wild oats. I was still married. I had 3 young children. But I went drinking and dancing, and I turned it into a project to justify to myself that I should do these things because it was work. So I did 25 things in one summer. I wrote the entire time, and by the end of the summer, I had a 500-page manuscript. My marriage was over, and a few weeks after that year, in the beginning of January, my mom got cancer. And I was even more depressed. It didn't solve anything. My mom beat cancer that year. It came back again. She beat it again. In 2012, she wasn't beating it. And as that became clearer, I kind of stopped eating, and my depression got worse. Now, once again, if you knew me, you might never know that I was dealing with this, because I was consummate at hiding it. Late in that year, my mom, about 2 weeks before she died, I went to her house. I was helping her go to the bathroom. And she was getting dressed again, and she reached down and she grasped her lower belly and she jiggled it. Now, she was probably under 100 pounds. She was close to leaving. And her belly was maybe the size of a quarter of a melon. But she said, this consummately optimistic and bright light of a person, she said, "My pooch, said it with such disdain and such shame that I filled with rage. And I could hardly speak. I helped her get dressed. I helped her back to bed. I kissed her goodbye. And I was consumed, raging against society that told her she wasn't beautiful because she had a little bit of a belly, raging against the suffering that she had that had brought her to this point, and raging against her, my best friend, because she had reached the end and she didn't love herself. She couldn't see her beauty. She couldn't see how brilliant she was. She had to attribute it all to God. And I respect religion, but I was furious. And I hit my car, and I got home after ranting and raving and crying in the car, and I took a bath. It was the only thing I thought I could do. And as I soaked in the hot water, my rage began to melt, and I began to have compassion for my mom and to see her circumstances with empathy instead of furious, grieving loss. And I looked down at my body, and for the first time in my life, it was as though I was seeing it from the outside, this little body, one body on this whole earth. And up out of my gut came love. And I started touching myself from head to toe, and I was just like, I love you. I love you. And it was the first time that I had ever felt love for myself that didn't come from work or you have to, or even Jesus, love your neighbor as yourself. I never got that. I was like, how am I supposed to? I have to just love my neighbor. I don't know what loving myself means. It's more pedicures or something. I have no idea. But I felt it that one moment. And then my mom died, and I lost my best friend, and I went deeper. And then in a couple years later, when I was coming out of that muffled grieving period, I decided to finish the book, to make it where other people could read it, and I got it done. And I thought getting this 10-year project done would solve my panic attacks and my depression, because I was doing the big thing. And I had a great launch party, and it all went great. And then my depression got worse. And my doctor finally recognized it, and she said, Janae, you've never dealt with the grieving your mother, and you haven't dealt with all the other stuff, and I'm sending you to a therapist. Now, I'd never been to a therapist because I could never afford it. We were very poor. And in the midst of therapy, the very first time I went to her, I handed her my book, which is a memoir about, all about me and my problems and my fear. And I said, if you just read this, it'll save us a lot of time. So 2 weeks later, she came back and she said, you say this is about facing your fear, but what I see is this is about self-judgment. And why would you ever think you can market something that's about you when you don't love yourself? And I was like, ugh. I judged myself for at least a month that I didn't see that my book was about self-judgment. And it is. The name of the book is The Oat Project. And thank you, Sharon. There are cards out on the table out there that you can find it by. It's on Amazon. It's done. You can read it. You'll know a lot about me. So after working with my therapist, we used one method in particular to get at trauma, to get at embedded crud. Why was I afraid of death, which was my trigger? Why did the depression not go away with accomplishment? It's called EMDR. I encourage you to look it up. It's just about unlocking the neural pathways while you're in the memory of trauma. It worked for me. And maybe 4 months ago, I've been doing this for 2 years, and about 4 months ago, I was sitting in the chair, I was doing the EMDR, and it was as though suddenly, up against the wall, behind my lady, as I call her, there was a bag with this thing inside, and it was a truth. And inside the bag was the truth that life is worth itself. And I just sort of noticed it and I moved on. 2 days later, I was eating lunch. I was watching a show that I was binging on. And I finished eating, but I kept watching. And I am really task-oriented, and I was really trying to kick into giving myself a lot of crap for still sitting there. Because I'm not working, you must be lazy, all of those things. And it was suddenly like the gears weren't working. And it occurred to me, if my life is worth itself, then maybe I'm just resting a little bit extra. Maybe I'm not lazy, and maybe I'm not a bad person, and maybe this is just a moment. And it began to filter through my existence, kind of like a virus, a good one. And it began to work through my life. If life is worth itself, then it doesn't matter what my potential was and if I've lived up to it or not. And that, flunking out of college and having to finish it 13 years later. If my life is worth itself, then my production doesn't matter, even though it's brilliant, but it doesn't prove my worth. I need no proof, and nobody else does either. It took it all away. And so it began to change how I see life. And I've shortened it to LIWI. You can say Liwi like Kiwi or Liwi like Wi-Fi. I don't care. But it is beginning to introduce me to the greatest love in my life. And that's myself. Because if I don't have to prove that I'm worth the space that I take up on this earth, because life is worth itself like the sky is blue or a rock is hard, then I can love myself for no reason at all. And I can do what I want. I can go for it. I can fail. I can stumble. Or I can dance. Because my life is worth itself. Finally. Love that didn't take work. And it didn't take logic. It just took looking at the sky.